You don't understand. You don't trust us to do your blood test, but you trust us to do weight loss surgery on you?
Dr. Now has seen some of the most extreme cases in my 600 lb life, but not every patient earned his patience or respect. Over the years, a few stood out for all the wrong reasons, pushing limits, ignoring advice, and testing even Dr. Now's patience like never before. Join us as we dive into the most frustrating, chaotic, and unforgettable cases Dr. Now ever faced. Robert Buchel. When Robert Buchel first appeared on my 600 lb life, his situation immediately stood out as one of the most serious cases Dr. Now had ever faced. Robert weighed close to 850 pounds and was in terrible physical condition. Even basic movement had become difficult for him. His body was overwhelmed by years of overeating, and his health was rapidly declining. From the very beginning, Dr. Now knew Robert was a very high-risk patient. His size alone put enormous pressure on his heart, lungs, and joints, but there was another major problem that worried the doctor just as much: Robert's addiction to painkillers. Robert depended heavily on medication to cope with pain, and it quickly became clear that his addiction was deeply rooted. Dr. Now understood that treating Robert's weight alone would not be enough. If the addiction remained uncontrolled, it could destroy any progress he made. Still, there was hope, because Robert did not enter the program alone. His fiancée, Catherine, stayed by his side throughout the process. She helped care for him, encouraged him, and supported him during some of his hardest moments. Unlike many relationships seen on the show, Catherine truly wanted Robert to survive and improve his life. At first, things actually started going well. Robert began following Dr. Now's strict diet plan and started losing weight quickly. The progress surprised many viewers. Over time, he lost hundreds of pounds, and it looked like he was finally taking control of his life. Dr. Now became encouraged by the results and believed Robert could become one of the program's success stories. After years of struggling with food addiction, Robert finally seemed motivated to change. One of the biggest moments in his journey came when doctors removed a large lymphedema mass from his body. The surgery was difficult, but it represented a major step forward. However, things began to change afterward. As Robert lost more weight and spent more time recovering in the hospital, his emotional state became worse. Depression started taking over. He struggled mentally with the changes happening in his life and body. While he had made progress against food addiction, his dependence on pain medication became stronger. Soon, Robert became obsessed with getting more medication. One of the most disturbing moments came when hospital staff discovered he had tampered with medical equipment connected to his treatment. Reports revealed he damaged part of the system so he could receive more pain medication. The incident shocked both the staff and viewers because it showed how powerful his addiction had become. At that point, Dr. Now realized Robert was fighting two separate battles at once: obesity and substance dependency. Dr. Now grew increasingly frustrated during this stage of Robert's treatment. He argued with Robert over medication use and repeatedly warned him about the dangers of addiction. The doctor also became angry at parts of the healthcare system that had allowed Robert's dependency to continue for so long without proper intervention. Dr. Now clearly cared deeply about Robert's case, and the emotional strain began to show. Unlike some patients who ignored treatment completely, Robert had actually tried hard to improve himself. That made the situation even more painful to watch. Sadly, Robert's story ended in tragedy. In November 2017, after months of treatment and major weight loss, Robert suffered a fatal heart attack. His death devastated Catherine and deeply affected the medical team. The atmosphere inside the hospital after his passing was emotional because everyone had seen how hard he had fought to survive. Dr. Now rarely shows strong emotion openly, but Robert's death clearly stayed with him. Even years later, many fans still consider Robert Buchel's episode one of the darkest and most heartbreaking in the history of My 600 Walid Satoibi life. His story showed that losing weight is only part of the battle, and sometimes the emotional struggles behind addiction can become even harder to overcome. But Robert's story was only the beginning, because the next patient pushed Dr. Now's patience in a completely different way. The Asante brothers. When Stephen and Justin Asante first appeared on My 600 LB Life, viewers expected an emotional story about two brothers helping each other survive. Both men struggled with extreme obesity and difficult personal histories, and many believed that having family support would improve their chances of success. Dr. Now often explained that patients with strong support systems usually had better outcomes. So at first, the Asante brothers seemed like they might actually make progress together. But it quickly became clear that their relationship was far from healthy. Stephen and Justin had a troubled upbringing that deeply affected both of them. Their family life was unstable, and over the years, the brothers developed emotional dependence on each other in unhealthy ways. They argued constantly, blamed each other for problems, and carried years of resentment into adulthood. While Justin appeared quieter and more withdrawn, Stephen immediately became the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. From the beginning of the program, Stephen refused to properly follow Dr. Now's diet plan. Even while claiming he was trying his best, he continued eating huge amounts of unhealthy food. Instead of losing weight consistently, he often gained weight or stayed the same. Dr. Now quickly realized Stephen was not being honest about what he was eating. Stephen also became known for his screaming fits, emotional outbursts, and manipulative behavior. Almost every appointment turned into chaos. One of Stephen's biggest problems was his obsession with painkillers and medical attention. He constantly complained about pain and repeatedly tried to get stronger medication. Hospital staff soon became frustrated because Stephen would create scenes whenever he did not get his way. He screamed at nurses, insulted doctors, and demanded special treatment. In some episodes, viewers watched him throw tantrums simply because he wanted pizza or other unhealthy food while hospitalized. Stephen knew how to manipulate people emotionally. He often cried, threatened to leave treatment, or acted helpless to pressure others into helping him. Family members, especially his father, seemed exhausted trying to deal with his behavior. Dr. Now became increasingly frustrated because Stephen showed very little accountability for his actions. Instead of focusing on recovery, he seemed more interested in attention and control. Some of the most disturbing moments involved Stephen's treatment of Justin. Their relationship became more toxic as the program continued. Stephen stole Justin's pain medication after Justin underwent surgery, which badly damaged what little trust remained between them. Justin already struggled emotionally, and Stephen's behavior pushed him even further toward isolation. The brothers began fighting constantly, both on and off camera, and their relationship completely fell apart in front of viewers. Justin eventually reached his breaking point. He became emotionally drained from dealing with Stephen's manipulation and aggression. Instead of focusing on his own recovery, he spent much of his time stressed about what Stephen would do next. Dr. Now wanted Justin to continue treatment because he believed Justin still had a real chance to improve his health. But the environment around the brothers had become too toxic. Eventually, Justin distanced himself from both Stephen and much of the program itself. As Stephen's behavior worsened, Dr. Now completely lost patience. The usually calm surgeon openly confronted him several times during appointments. He warned Stephen that he would remove him from the program if he continued refusing treatment and disrespecting medical staff. Dr. Now could clearly see the difference between a patient who genuinely wanted help and someone who mainly wanted attention. In Stephen's case, the doctor believed manipulation had become a major obstacle to recovery. Over time, Stephen became one of the most infamous patients in the entire history of My 600 LB Life. Many viewers were shocked by his behavior, while others felt sympathy because of his obvious emotional and psychological problems. Either way, his episodes became impossible to ignore because there always seemed to be another argument, another meltdown, or another setback waiting around the corner. Surprisingly, Stephen later got married, something many fans never expected. However, reports about his health struggles continued long after the show. Justin, meanwhile, chose to distance himself from the chaos and focus more on his own life, away from his brother's constant drama. Even years later, the Asante brothers remain some of the most unforgettable people ever featured on the series because their story was about far more than weight loss. It was about addiction, manipulation, family damage, and emotional collapse happening in front of millions of viewers. And if you thought the Asante brothers were difficult, the next patient frustrated Dr. Now in a completely different way. Bethany Stout. When Bethany Stout appeared on My 600 LB Life, she immediately stood out because of how openly she talked about her addiction to food. Early in her episode, she made a shocking confession that viewers still remember. If she had to choose between food and sleep, she would choose food. That single statement revealed just how deeply food controlled her life. Eating was not just a habit for Bethany. It had become her main source of comfort, happiness, and emotional escape. At the time, Bethany's weight had made everyday activities extremely difficult. She depended heavily on her husband, Sheldon, and her daughter, Isabella, to take care of her needs. They brought her food, helped her around the house, and supported her physically and emotionally. While they clearly loved her and wanted her to improve, the situation had created an unhealthy cycle where Bethany relied on them for almost everything. Much of her daily routine revolved around eating, resting, and avoiding physical activity. When she joined Dr. Now's program, there was hope that things would finally begin to change. However, the start of her journey quickly became frustrating. Bethany claimed she was following the strict diet plan given to her by Dr. Now, but her weight loss was extremely slow. In some cases, she barely lost any weight at all. Dr. Now became suspicious because the numbers simply did not match what she was saying. He had seen many patients deny overeating before, and he believed Bethany was still struggling to be honest about her eating habits. The biggest issue was not just food itself, but Bethany's emotional resistance to change. She seemed to want the results of weight loss without fully accepting the lifestyle changes needed to get there. Like many patients on the show, she struggled to break years of unhealthy habits and emotional eating patterns. Even when she understood the danger her weight posed to her health, she still found comfort in the same behaviors hurting her. Eventually, though, Bethany began making real progress. After months of effort, she lost over 100 pounds and finally reached the point where she qualified for weight loss surgery. This was a major turning point in her journey. Her gastric sleeve procedure went successfully, and for a short time, it looked like her life was finally heading in the right direction. Viewers saw moments of optimism and hope as she became more mobile and started imagining a healthier future. Unfortunately, that progress did not last. After surgery, Bethany slowly began slipping back into old habits. Instead of continuing to lose weight steadily, she started regaining some of the weight she had worked so hard to lose. The slower pace of recovery frustrated her emotionally. She appeared discouraged when results did not happen as quickly as she wanted, and emotional eating began taking control again. Over time, her motivation weakened, and she became less committed to Dr. Now's program. Eventually, Bethany decided to leave the program entirely. She believed she could lose weight on her own without continuing Dr. Now's treatment. For many viewers, this decision was disappointing because she had already shown she was capable of making progress when she truly committed herself. Her story frustrated fans because there was such a large gap between what she said and what she actually did. Bethany had strong family support and real opportunities to improve her health, but mentally, she never seemed fully ready to let go of the emotional comfort food gave her. Dr. Now often struggles most with patients who refuse to change emotionally, and Bethany became another example of how difficult long-term recovery can be without that mental commitment. And while Bethany struggled quietly, the next patient brought anger, trauma, and non-stop conflict into Dr. Now's office. Angela Johns. When Angela Johns appeared on My 600 LB Life, it was immediately clear that her struggles went far beyond food addiction. Angela arrived in Dr. Now's program weighing around 643 pounds, and her health was already in serious danger. She had trouble moving, relied heavily on others for help, and lived with years of emotional pain that affected nearly every part of her life. While many patients on the show carry emotional trauma, Angela's past was especially difficult and deeply connected to the behavior viewers later saw on screen. Angela spoke openly about growing up in a troubled environment filled with abuse and addiction. She experienced instability from an early age and lived through painful situations that left lasting emotional damage. One of the hardest experiences she revealed was being forced to give away a child as a teenager. The emotional impact of that loss stayed with her for years. On top of that, she also dealt with abusive family relationships and substance abuse around her throughout her life. Over time, food became one of the ways she coped with stress, sadness, and emotional pain. Dr. Now understood that Angela's trauma played a major role in her condition, but he also knew that emotional pain alone could not excuse destructive behavior. From the very beginning of the program, Angela resisted treatment. She repeatedly ignored instructions, struggled to follow the diet plan, and missed important weight loss goals. During appointments, she often defended her behavior with excuses instead of accepting responsibility. Dr. Now became frustrated because he could see that Angela was not fully committed to changing her lifestyle. Her anger also affected the people around her. Throughout the episode, Angela often lashed out at loved ones and caregivers. Instead of creating a supportive environment, her household became emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. Her children and family members frequently became targets for her frustration, especially when things did not go the way she wanted. Viewers could see how drained and stressed the family had become after years of dealing with constant tension and conflict. Dr. Now recognized something important while working with Angela. He noticed patterns of generational trauma and abuse repeating themselves inside the family. Angela had grown up around addiction and unhealthy behavior, and now some of those same toxic patterns were appearing in her own relationships. The emotional damage from her past had never properly healed, and it continued affecting how she treated herself and others. In Angela's case, addiction and trauma were feeding into each other constantly. The more emotional pain she carried, the more she relied on unhealthy coping mechanisms. Things became even more serious when Angela's toxicology reports revealed narcotics in her system. The drug test changed the direction of her treatment completely. Dr. Now confronted her directly about the results and explained that surgery would not solve her problems if addiction remained untreated. He believed rehab and psychological treatment were necessary before she could truly recover. In his view, Angela needed emotional healing just as much as physical treatment. But Angela refused rehabilitation entirely. That refusal became one of the biggest turning points in her story. Dr. Now had worked with many difficult patients before, but he could only help someone who was willing to participate honestly in their own recovery. Angela continued resisting accountability and dismissed many of the doctor's concerns. Instead of embracing treatment, she pushed back against it. Over time, it became obvious that surgery alone would never fix the deeper emotional issues controlling her life. Eventually, Dr. Now reached his limit. He understood that there were limits to what medical treatment could accomplish without mental and emotional commitment from the patient. Angela's story became one of the clearest examples on the show of self-sabotage. She had opportunities to improve her health and support available around her, but her unresolved trauma, anger, and refusal to fully accept help kept pulling her backward. What made Angela's journey so difficult to watch was that viewers could see both sides of her situation. On one hand, her past explained why she struggled so deeply. On the other hand, her constant resistance made real recovery almost impossible. Dr. Now often says patients must take responsibility for their own survival, and Angela's story showed exactly why that matters. But while Angela fought against help, the next patient's story became heartbreaking for a completely different reason. Sean Milliken. When Sean Milliken first appeared on My 600 LB Life, his condition was one of the most severe viewers had ever seen. Sean weighed close to 900 pounds and was almost completely immobile. He spent most of his time confined to his bed and depended on his mother for nearly everything. Simple tasks like bathing, preparing food, cleaning, and moving around were impossible for him to do alone. His entire life revolved around the care his mother provided every single day. Sean's relationship with his mother was very close, but it was also deeply unhealthy. She acted as his full-time caregiver and handled every aspect of his daily routine. Over time, Sean became emotionally dependent on her in a way that prevented him from developing any independence. While she clearly loved her son and wanted to protect him, the constant caregiving also enabled his lifestyle. Instead of pushing Sean to become more self-sufficient, their relationship kept him emotionally stuck in the same cycle. Their isolation made things even worse. Sean had very little social interaction outside of his mother, and much of his life happened inside the home. Without outside support, friendships, or independence, food became one of his main sources of comfort. The loneliness and emotional dependence slowly contributed to his weight spiraling further out of control. When Sean joined Dr. Now's program, however, there were signs of hope. Unlike some patients who fought the doctor at every step, Sean initially seemed willing to work hard. He began following the diet plan more seriously and started losing weight. Over time, he made enough progress to qualify for weight loss surgery, which was a major milestone in his journey. Dr. Now encouraged Sean not only to lose weight, but also to start becoming more independent from his mother emotionally and physically. For a while, it seemed like Sean was finally beginning to change. He showed motivation, listened to instructions, and worked toward improving his mobility. Viewers saw moments where it looked like he might finally build a healthier future for himself. Dr. Now believed Sean had potential if he continued pushing himself forward. But everything changed after the death of Sean's mother. She passed away from renal failure, and the loss completely shattered Sean emotionally. The one person he depended on for survival was suddenly gone. Sean struggled deeply with grief and had no idea how to function without her constant support. Instead of continuing his progress, he emotionally collapsed under the weight of loneliness and depression. The loss affected every part of his life. Without his mother, Sean became isolated again very quickly. He struggled to maintain routines, take care of himself, and stay emotionally stable. Depression took over, and his motivation faded. Over time, he began regaining weight and losing control of the progress he had fought so hard to achieve. His emotional dependence had been so strong that once his mother was gone, Sean seemed unable to cope with life on his own. As his mental health worsened, so did his physical condition. Sean suffered repeated infections and severe medical complications. His body became weaker, and the health issues started piling up again. Dr. Now continued trying to help him and encouraged him to stay focused on recovery. But Sean was trapped in a frightening downward spiral. Each setback made it harder for him to recover emotionally or physically. Viewers could see that Sean wanted things to get better, but grief and emotional instability kept pulling him backward. His story became heartbreaking because he was not openly rebellious or manipulative like some patients on the show. Instead, he seemed overwhelmed by sadness and completely lost without the only support system he had ever known. In 2019, Sean passed away at just 29 years old after suffering from a serious infection. His death shocked fans because many had watched him fight so hard to improve earlier in his journey. What made his story especially tragic was the realization that emotional dependence can be just as dangerous as physical illness. Sean never truly learned how to survive independently, and after losing his mother, the emotional damage became too much to overcome. To this day, Sean Milliken's story remains one of the saddest and most emotional journeys ever shown on My 600 LBV. What a life, because viewers watched a young man slowly lose both his health and the person he depended on most. But the next patient's story became shocking for a very different reason, especially after he appeared to be one of Dr. Now's biggest success stories. James L.B. Bonner. When James L.B. Bonner appeared on My 600 LB Life, many viewers quickly connected with his story because of how honest and determined he seemed from the very beginning. Unlike some patients who resisted treatment or denied responsibility for their condition, James openly admitted that his weight gain was tied to emotional pain and personal struggles. His journey started after a devastating accident that changed his life forever. James lost one of his legs in a serious crash, and the physical and emotional impact of that event completely changed the direction of his life. After the accident, he struggled deeply with depression and isolation. Losing a limb affected not only his mobility, but also his confidence and emotional well-being. Like many people facing trauma, James turned to unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with the pain. Food became a source of comfort, and alcohol addiction also became part of his struggle. Over time, his weight increased dramatically, making daily life harder and pushing him further into emotional isolation. By the time James entered Dr. Now's program, his health had become dangerous. But almost immediately, viewers noticed something different about him. James genuinely wanted to change. He listened carefully to Dr. Now's instructions and fully committed himself to the strict diet and exercise plan. While many patients argued with the doctor or made excuses, James focused on doing the work. That determination quickly produced results. Over the course of the program, James lost more than 300 pounds. His transformation impressed both viewers and Dr. Now himself. The doctor often praises patients who show discipline and consistency, and James became one of the clearest examples of that. He followed the program seriously, pushed himself physically, and stayed focused on improving his health. What made James especially inspiring was his positive attitude throughout much of the journey. Even while dealing with pain and emotional struggles, he remained motivated and hopeful. Fans admired his willingness to take responsibility for his condition instead of blaming others. His story became one of the rare examples on the show where viewers could clearly see a patient making real and lasting progress through hard work. As James continued losing weight, many areas of his life started improving. His mobility became better, and he gained more confidence in himself. He worked on building healthier routines and habits, showing that change was possible even after years of struggle. Many fans viewed him as proof that Dr. Now's program could truly succeed when patients fully committed to it. Because of this, James quickly became one of the most popular and beloved patients in the show's history. His episode stood out because it combined emotional honesty with genuine effort and visible progress. Viewers rooted for him because they could see how badly he wanted a second chance at life. That is why what happened next shocked so many people. In 2018, after all the success he had achieved, James sadly passed away. News of his death devastated fans who had followed his journey and celebrated his progress. Many people struggled to understand how someone who had come so far could still be carrying so much emotional pain inside. His death also raised difficult questions about mental health and emotional recovery. James had transformed physically, but his story became a reminder that losing weight does not automatically heal depression, trauma, or loneliness. Emotional struggles can continue even after major life improvements, and for some people, those battles remain hidden from others. For many viewers, James L.B. Bonner's story remains one of the most heartbreaking in my 600 LB life because it began with so much hope and ended in such a tragic and unexpected way. His journey showed that physical transformation is important, but emotional healing matters just as much. These stories showed that Dr. Now's hardest patients were not always the ones with the highest weight, but often the ones battling addiction, trauma, denial, and emotional pain behind the scenes. Some fought until the very end, while others pushed away every chance they were given. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking TV stories and behind-the-scenes drama.